happened. That was fine. Good morning and welcome to the 18th Tech Spark Coffee Morning, our first of 2021. And one thing that we've heard a lot from our members is it's been a time of reflection. I'm not going to say that everyone's had extra time because that's not fair. A lot of people have had less time. We're not all looking like Olympic athletes and speaking Russian as we all thought we would do when we went into lockdown almost this time last year. But we have had time to think about what's important to us and to our businesses and where we want to be and how we're perceived. And a lot of organizations that we're speaking to are either have started branding projects or considering branding projects. And we thought this is a really interesting, constructive conversation to bring as our first session of the year. And so we have a panel who are either going through it or have gone through it or help clients go through it. So lots of different perspectives. Welcome all. Please introduce yourselves for those who may not know you. Ash, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Classic. Hope everybody can hear me okay. Yeah, I'm Ash, and I'm the founder. This is going to be a weird thing to get used to, and everybody's going to be doing it on this call, I think. But I'm the founder of Different, which used to be known as Yena. We are a company that provide business benefits by subscription and have a global community for creators.
Margaret.
I'm Margaret Davidson. I'm growth manager for IO Academy, previously Maiden Academy. We're a coding bootcamp based in Bath, ranked 6th best in the world. And we work very closely with the tech community, obviously trying to get our fresh new developers into great jobs.
Natasha.
Hello, I'm Natasha McKensie, and I have recently set up Talisman Hub, which is a brand communications consultancy firm. Specialising in the sort of tech and high growth space. I previously ran Australia Green, where we did marketing for startup companies, and I continue to work a lot with the sort of tech community here in Bristol and globally. So yeah, really pleased to be here today to talk about branding.
Andy, you're back. Perfect timing.
I am back. Yeah, I don't know what was going on, and I was getting weird kind of looping on the audio, but. Anyway, hopefully you can hear me okay now.
All perfect.
Okay, so I'm Andy Langely. I'm CEO of Ntegra. We are a technology and business change consultancy based in Swindon. One of our specialities is around driving digital transformation for our clients. And we were pretty good at that. We work for a number of large agencies, media companies in London. We also work for people like Waitrose and Vodafone. So, and we've been around for 16 years, actually. So, you know, rebranding is relevant to us because where we are now in the middle of a rebrand is the first time we've gone through this exercise since we were formed. Really, we've done sort of tactical, smaller initiatives, but this is the first time we're tackling it in a meaningful way.
One thing we started almost this before we went live, didn't we? About that first question about what is brand, which is a massive rabbit hole of discussion, which we can't talk about for the next 40 minutes because, you know, there's so much we could talk about. But brand, Natasha, as you said, used to be you brand your cow, basically. It was just your mark. It was a logo, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I still get that from clients today. They're like, well, we've got a logo. Like,
you're sorted then.
Yeah, but it's so much more, and it's so intangible. It's really hard to actually put a pin in it and say, oh yeah, you've done your brand. You never do your brand. It's you know, what I quite often say is it's that feeling. I've taken this from somebody else, but it's that feeling when you leave the room that people are left with, and it's got to transcend everything. It's got to go through, you know, everything, right from, you know, that kind of stick of rock analogy of your team and what is it that kind of goes through everybody culturally to all your different touch points and you know, across every piece of communication.
There's a really interesting quote about the definition of brand, and as you say, it's how people perceive you.
Yeah.
So it's not about what you are and what you do and what you think you're doing. It's how people perceive that you are doing it. Andy, after 16 years, how did you unpack how your brand and your business has evolved? And what you want to say going forward? Go on, yeah.
Because we kind of kicked off, and I was guilty of the fact it's kind of logos, fonts, and colours is where we need to start. But I think the thing we did as part of our rebranding exercise that made the biggest difference was we actually engaged an external agency and looked at our brand positioning, and that was probably the light bulb moment for a lot of people about how to rebrand, because we started to look at how we described ourselves, the sort of tone of voice. We even got into things like differentiators. So we started to think about how we position ourselves against our competitors. So it became much broader than just logos, fonts, and colors and PowerPoint templates, etc. And I think even now, because we're sort of in flight in terms of our projects, so we haven't completed yet, that brand positioning piece started to deliver value as soon as we finished it, because immediately people could talk to clients more coherently about what we do, and recognize that over the years that we've been trading, things have changed. And it was phenomenally powerful in terms of getting people aligned.
I think it's something we should do yearly, but it feels like a luxury. Margaret, what prompted you to think about rebranding?
It was really, growth as a company. So when we started out, we were set up by Maiden, who are a health tech company, and we weren't started really as a company. We were started as a solution to a problem that they had, which is we can't get enough developers. So they decided to train some. They set up Maiden Academy, and it started out fairly small, and it was sort of more like a product of Maiden. So we were called Maiden Academy. We had the same colors that we used and fonts and things like that across the brand. And 5 years later, suddenly, we'd grown into something else entirely. We were, really successful as a business on our own. But we had the same colors and identity and name, and there was a huge amount of confusion between Maiden and Maiden Academy. So we really realized that, we have to make a shift, and we have to make it clear that we are actually a different being and a different entity now. So but we were really lucky that, when we're talking about brand, for me, there's two brands. There's the brand of, who you are as a company, and as you say, how you're perceived as a company. And it's sort of getting that alignment between the two. And I think we were absolutely clear on who we are as a company, but we weren't actually getting that message across. So we were really lucky that we did know, but we just needed someone to come in and say, okay, and this is how we're going to show that.
Absolutely. And Ash, finally, I know you said this has been bubbling around your head for a while. What took it from a thing you felt like you should do to actually implementing it?
Good question. Probably panic, I imagine. It was mostly kind of a growing up process, I think. Like we're half the age as a company that Andy's company is, but the brand just felt like it had come to kind of this impasse where we've moved out of our childhood years and into our kind of like teen, early adult years, where we're realizing who we are and what we actually want to do as a product. So that was triggered also by, I guess, past understandings of what we used to be. People still describe us as what we started out as in our first year of building the community. And that's dangerous to us because it limits our addressable market. We want to obviously help more people in a wider remit. And so, just drawing a line in the sand and saying, hey, look, here's who we are and what we do. And a rebrand was obviously a good trigger for that. Not the only reason to do that, but it was a good catalyst to try and make that happen. But definitely, just to recap on what Natasha said, that's why I gave such a big nod. Those are the exact words I think about when I think about rebranding. It's like what people think about you when you're not in the room, what they say about you when you're not in the room, and how they feel about you when you're not in the room. And it's it goes for personal brands, but also company brands too.
Did you all ask your customers when you went through this rebranding exercise what they think of you? Andy, did you kind of?
We didn't actually. We ran we did a lot of work internally. So we brought people in from across our business. So we poured in all of our staff into the process. And there's another link actually for us around rebranding, which is also how we want to be as an employer and look after our people. And so there is a connection right the way through to how we do that. But no, we didn't talk to clients, which probably, with hindsight, we should have. But yeah.
It sounds like you had a mammoth project anyway after 16 years. And I think maybe next time it sounds like it might become a more regular thing. And I think brands should be living, they should be evolving. And Natasha, obviously that's your area of expertise. People do think, I'll do this exercise once every 5, 10, whatever years. Surely it's a conversation you keep having.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because it's you can't stop it. You know, once it's out there, as Ash said, you know, people are talking about you, and that's what you want. You want that engagement, and so yeah, you can't control it. And I think that's what's really important is about how people perceive brand. It's got to kind of radiate out of the organisation. So, you know, to Andy's point, it's really good to look in the business, but then to Margaret's point, you also have to look outside the business and then align those two. So that perception shift's really, really critical to that. And actually, you know, what people fail to recognise is that's a huge transformation programme to go through as an organisation. You know, it's about understanding what those transformation objectives are right up front. You know, why are you doing this? Like you said, you know, for Ash, you know, some of that's about market drivers, some of that's about financial drivers. But then you've got to go through the business strategy piece and the engagement strategy internally to then get to your brand strategy. So it's not just like, let's just put some words out there and hope they stick.
Shiny new logo, it'll all be fine.
Yeah. It's got to permeate, it's got to radiate from inside the business, and then you've got to continue that engagement, you know, and you've got to keep bringing that back into the business. And yeah, it's all about communication. That's what it's about.
And that's why it takes time. I mean, Margaret, how long was your branding project?
So the project itself was about 10 months. So it took a long time, but leading up to that, you know, we'd been thinking about it for years and trying to work out what's the best thing to do. We know we've got this problem that there's a lot of, you know, brand confusion between us and our parent company. And it's a really big step to take to decide to change name and identity. And, you know, you've really got to weigh up the risks against the benefits of that. So it wasn't a decision we took lightly at all. And it's something that we really had to do. We talked a lot to the people within our parent company, because we've still got, you know, very strong links, and we don't want to lose that. And we want to make sure that, you know, they're all happy with what's happening. But we also talked a lot to, you know, our clients, who are essentially our students and our graduates and the tech community over, you know, how do you perceive us and how do you feel about us and all that sort of thing. So the lead up to it took a really long time, and then the project itself took a really long time. And you know, it got extended a few times, and I would never recommend to anyone, by the way, rebranding during a pandemic. It's like not the most fun in the world. But I am so glad that we did take time doing it, and we had a lot of going back and forth, you know, particularly with our alumni network and our students saying, how do you feel about this? We're thinking of doing this, you know, what are your opinions? Because ultimately that's who we're doing it for, and there's no point charging ahead with something that isn't actually serving, you know, or doesn't resonate with the people we're meant to be working with.
Andy, I was thinking, I was just following off Margaret's comment about doing this during a pandemic. How did you find getting all the key stakeholders in the business together, sort of literally and figuratively?
Yeah, I mean,
quite strategic conversations you were having here.
Yeah, I mean, strangely, it's funny actually. We have found in general, not just on this project, but in general through lockdown, a lot of things have become easier, and it's in terms of communication, and it's been easier to have, you know, quick bursts of activity, sort of half-hour check-ins rather than 2-hour face-to-face meetings. And so for us, I actually think lockdown, I don't know whether it's been a help. It's certainly not been a hindrance. So it's improved, I think, sort of line of sight from where we are to where we want to be, and made lots of things around communication, you know, simpler. And I think also because we've had to put so much effort into managing the team, that, you know, that has worked back into the branding exercise as well. So in terms of our values and what we want to, and all of that shifted during this as well. So yeah, you could almost say it's positive.
It's part of a different conversation you were having with everybody. And I guess almost also them all being a part of that journey gives them more, because this is part of a plan for basically, Ntegra is a really, you know, you're doing amazing things, but not enough people know about you.
Absolutely. And I think there's another thing, isn't it, for us around the pandemic and timing of the rebrand, which is, you know, we are going to emerge from this at some stage in terms of this kind of hunkered down, lockdown way of existing. And we wanted to kind of be ready for that. So it's very much being fresh and new and clear about the value, clear
revitalized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, to that point where we were saying we didn't bring clients into the rebrand. I mean, obviously, from an account management perspective and project delivery, we're talking to them all the time in terms of getting lessons learned and feedback, and that when they give us feedback on what it's like to work with us, we absolutely have baked that into what we're doing around brand and how it is to work with us.
And it sounds from what you said, actually having that strategic conversation, engaging the team, and then being more confident with the Ntegra message is going to help kind of hook the clients in. So it doesn't have to be as literal. It can be actually through relationships.
Correct.
So Ash, was this project more painful than you thought it was going to be?
Yes and no. I mean, emotionally, it's painful, right? It's like you are renaming your child after, 5-10 years of bringing them up, or changing your dog's name and they don't remember, and trying to make them forget their old name. It's there's always more to it. I remember when I used to be naively kind of entering business and had a design agency, I remember seeing that Accenture's rebrand was famously something like $100 million, and being shocked at how insanely expensive that was, because how can a logo cost that much? And then realizing now that, of course, there's so much more to it. Changing, your Google for work, your workspace by Google kind of over to a new platform, and redirecting your domain names and unsubscribing and resubscribing to newsletters and so on and so on and so on. And that is one person. So you multiply that by the people that Accenture have, it gets very painful, I'm sure. So yes, it was emotionally and logistically, it was a tough one. But we worked with great partners with Gareth at Bello, who turned it around faster than I thought possible. And just to Natasha's point, it was powerful having it done out of house, because if I was doing it, which because of my experience I could have, but recognized that if I tried to, it would never be finished. And so because it was done by somebody else, it meant that we could turn it around in essentially what was 3 to 4 weeks rather than...
Is it live now?
It is live, yeah. It went live on Monday, so people can check it out. Cheap plug, different.so, there you go.
Andy, are you live yet?
No.
Almost. You're not far off, are you?
We're desperately close, yeah. So, and we've had that. I mean, we were talking prior to the call kicking off. The challenge we have, we've done a huge amount of this ourselves. We used agency input and expertise to help us around that sort of messaging piece and positioning piece, which was really strong and good. But we decided to do it in house. But it's always competing for our time against client work, and it can be a huge challenge. And it's also, I guess, it's a good thing. It just happened to have landed at a time when we were super busy. So, which I guess is a nice problem to have. But I know if any of the guys are on the call, they'll be sat there rolling their eyes when I say that. So, yeah, it's been frustrating as well.
So, Natasha, I can pick up on Ash's point of renaming babies. So if someone comes to you, they bring the baby and go, I love my baby, but I need to rename my baby and make it do different things. Where do you start?
The last thing you do is go out and say to people, do you like the name of my baby? Because everyone goes, oh, I'm not sure, actually I wouldn't. Yeah, but if you go, my baby's called this now and it means da da da, and you give them all the rationale, then they go, oh, that's great, I really get this. So I think it's really important to kind of know like who the stakeholders are in that process. That's the first piece, and to understand why you're doing it. So Margaret said a really nice thing when she was talking, taking time. Like, you've got to take that time to transform, right? You've got to understand, like, it commits, because it's a big undertaking, and you need to understand who you're taking with you on that journey. So it is an engagement process. So that first piece is so important. Like, who are you taking with you on that journey, and what role do they all play in doing this, and why are we doing it? So that's really the first kind of, I think, piece of the pie, as it were. But then, back to the point that we made right at the beginning of this conversation, it's not a beginning, middle, and end process. It's ongoing. So there's also brand advocacy that you need to create. So finding those kind of brand advocates are really important. So understanding who's going to drive this, like especially in a larger organization where you've got different departments. So making sure you've got the right people kind of brought into it as a process. And actually, I was on a call with a client yesterday, and it's amazing actually, like how once you explain why you're doing something, people will rally. Organizations want to succeed. They want to be resilient. They want to be part of the process. So the right people will come with you on that journey. So yeah, that would be my first kind of port of call is find the tribe and brief them and make sure that you're all aligned on where you're going.
And you've got to have brand clarity for when you set it free into the world, because your brand, social media, and all the other channels you end up on, it can be a minefield, can't it, of misunderstanding and nuances. So if you've got to be as clear for what you stand for and what your brand priorities, your mission statement, your value proposition is, because you want other people who aren't in your organization to get it.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I think the value proposition is critical to all of this, because what you've got to do is understand, like Andy was saying, like what makes you unique, what do you do, and then look at that in context of your marketplace, and benchmark against the competition to create that kind of clear blue water to grow into. So there's a piece of work that has to happen before you start looking at the logo and what and your values. There's a piece of work to do there, and then it's almost like you're pulling the business apart, which is brutal when it's your baby. You're literally like, looking under the lid and taking wires out and kind of go, oh, I don't want to look, but then you've got to put it all back together again. And once you do that, the value proposition creates a really solid foundation, if you get that right, for you then to build your whole kind of comms hierarchy, your whole kind of architecture around. But that value proposition has to work across all your different audience groups.
I love business model canvas. I'd always want to just kind of get that chunk and start building it out, because it's a very visual brand. But going back, we took the mick out of names, didn't we? And before we went live, I talked about an organisation I work with, which have an awful name, which we're not going to mention. But it's a minefield, isn't it? How did you choose, Margaret? How did you decide upon your name for your new brand?
It was so hard. And I think part of the hardest thing is accepting that there's probably not going to be a point at which everyone goes, like there's rays of light coming through and hallelujah choruses and that sort of thing. It's the one. Naming is really bloody difficult, particularly in this day and age, because almost anything you come up with will already exist in some, way, shape or form, whether it's locally or across the world, your name will probably already be used somewhere. So a lot of it is actually about coming up with a range of ideas and then checking what's already out there. And most of the time, the fantastic ideas that you've come up with, someone else has already come up with, and you're not going to be able to do it. So it's really, really difficult. So, once we'd come up with, a short list of names that, not necessarily weren't being used elsewhere, but weren't being used as much as all the other ideas we'd come up with, it was basically going back to, again, what's the core DNA points of our business? What are the 4 things that we previously identified as being, the foundation stones of what we're all about? And let's go through each of these names and, everyone on the team rank them according to, what points we think they're hitting. So, sort of trying to take that emotion out of it, because names are one of the more emotional parts of it. I think that we all have very strong reactions, based on, I think it sounds a bit the same as the name of someone I went to school with, and they weren't very nice, and so I don't like that. And so you really have to take yourself out of it, I think, with the name. And so yeah, it was really taking it right back to what did we identify as being, the core truths of what we're all about, and we have to mark against that, really.
So Ash, how did you find your new name?
It was actually quite formulaic, to be honest. Thanks to Gareth, I've recognized that I'm like super biased, so I tried to remove all the bias out of it. And actually, similarly, again to what Andy was talking about, not going to the community. It's weird because almost everything we've ever done has been community led, and for good reason. We are a community by default. But there's that classic Henry Ford quote of, if you ask people what they want, they tell you more horses. And I feel like with the name it would have been too close to the mark or too abstract. So just wanted to kind of leave that out of the process and just surprise everybody, like Natasha said, hey, here's what our new name is. So yeah, we went through a couple of rounds of names, long list. These are all sorts of names that we could use. These are the ones that are accidentally offensive that we didn't realize. Let's do a bit of research and make sure we don't use those. These are the ones that are interesting. These are the ones that are boring, and so on. Narrow them down. And as I say, it was over a very short period of around a month, and we got to 2. I already had a favorite, but as I'm learning again, from an investment point of view, not to lead with your heart too much, sleep on it 24 hours at least, and think about all the other opportunities and with the other options available. Did that. The bias did win out though in the end, and went with a name different. And I guess just like Margaret said, there's I think it's the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor says something like there's 100 million new businesses created a year. Now, obviously, they're not all going to be brands, sub-brands, etc. But that still means there's going to be a lot of new brands. It also means that there are very few domains left that are relevant to the name that you want. You're always going to have somebody with the same name as you. And so it's about just owning that new name and going for it. As long as it's probably not Google or Apple, you should be okay for a bit. So we're different and hopefully are trying to own it now.
So finally, Andy, take me back 16 years ago. Ntegra. What does Ntegra mean?
Well, it's actually, so the name was created by the co-founders, Bill Hart and Andy Jeffries, and it's kind of a play on words. So it's a key part of the ethos or the founding principles of the business was around integrity, and a lot of the work we were doing then was around integration. So you kind of play around with those and you get up with Ntegra. I like to think we were dropping vowels from our name way before everybody else started.
Ash, just so on that. Yeah.
Although we did leave a couple in. But clearly we need to go back and remove those if we're going to.
I like it because it's really fresh, because it doesn't have any insinuations. As I would have put it with, as you say, sort of positives. But did you have any challenges with it globally? Is there anywhere that doesn't get?
I mean, we trademarked it, so we've done all of that to make sure it's protected and it's ours. But I mean, the only other company that has it, there's a company that makes money counting machines that's called Ntegra, and occasionally we get staff from their organisation try and join us on LinkedIn, but or we get the odd support and maintenance call which we can't deal with. But no, otherwise it's been great, and actually it has really stood the test of time. It's be a good name, and we often get asked where it came from, and I think when you lead with that principle around integrity, that's a really good place to start a conversation if you're partnering up with a potential client. So it does work really well.
You immediately focused on a core value of the business for your name.
Yeah,
that's a very powerful lead, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think we've touched on this a little bit, is about unexpected benefits to this process. I mean, leading actually from Andy with Margaret, it sounds like you gauged your whole team and got everybody involved in this. Is everyone feeling quite excited about this fresh start, fresh brand energy?
They all got a hoodie for Christmas, so...
That's what you're supposed to be wearing, Andy. You should go out the wash ready for your call.
I realised I failed.
So Ash, all you've done is just got merch, isn't it? That was your key priority.
I get it. I've got a hat as well. Just be that guy. Yeah,
I think so, because I mean we did things like voting on the logo and things like that, so it was a very democratic process, and so I think there's some buy-in, and I hope when it goes live, and the fact people have got the hoodies with the new logo and all this, I just think it looks kind of fresher and younger than we did before. And so my hope is that our staff feel that that's quite refreshing and in many respects a positive thing to adopt this year. It's kind of new year, new brand, getting out of COVID, you sort of think it's all kind of quite a virtuous circle, I think. So
as a member of your team or a client, I think I'd be incredibly reassured that you've used this time to think about growth and evolution and moving forward. You're not just shoring up and surviving through this period. This is good. You're bouncing.
Yeah, that was the principle we had all the way through. We've tried ever so hard as a team to keep doing that and keep try to keep growing, keep moving forward. Yeah, we did not want to tread water, because I think there's this old kind of thing, isn't there? maxim. There's no such thing as a steady state in a business. You're either growing or shrinking. You're either moving forwards or backwards. It's very difficult to have a standstill. And so we took the option to try and keep moving forwards.
And you're a business that's curious. You're a business working lots in Silicon Valley and in the Middle East with emerging technologies. And you want to have that energy and that curiosity in your brand because that's your big value proposition. Ntegra did a wonderful round the world in a day back in October, wasn't it? Speaking to entrepreneurs literally across the globe just to kind of prove the relationships they've got. And we're going to tap into that later in the year for the next Tech Swindon Summit because those are great conversations to be having. So to show that you've got that energy. Yeah, to be fair, anything to stop watching the news over the last year, I think. So working on brand is all good. But Margaret, how's it been with your team? The same sort of energy and excitement?
Yeah, I think, ultimately we were all really happy with it. There were no nasty surprises. Everyone felt involved the whole way through. And, ultimately I think we were working with Fiasco in Bristol. They were a great agency. It was a really collaborative effort the whole way through. And ultimately, like the way I think about it is it's like chipping away to uncover something that's already there. So it's sort of like we've already got a fantastic brand. We know how we feel about what we do. It's just having someone else come along like a sort of like an archaeologist and chipping away at something, and they're just uncovering what we've already got. So I think everyone that we talked to was really happy that it made us shine. And the best piece of feedback we had was from one of our ex-students who said, it looks now like the way the academy makes me feel. And that's
perfect.
Everything we could have wanted.
You couldn't ask for anything more, could you?
Natasha, you've been building your brand of your new organisation as well as helping clients. We talked about the Builder's House, didn't we, as well? Who are you brainstorming with to put ideas together for your new business as it launches?
Lots of people, and this is the difficulty doing it for yourself because you need that perspective, and then ultimately you've got to make that decision. So what I'm very good at doing is giving framework to other people, but it's very hard to do that for yourself. So it's definitely worth engaging with an external agency to go through that process. And I'm not just saying that because I am one. I'm going through the process.
But you're doing it too, so
yeah. But I think just to pick up on a point a couple of people have made, if I can, that actually this is a really, really good time to be going through a branding exercise or a kind of an engagement program, whatever we want to call it, transformation, because it's the world has shifted, right? And we are having to communicate in different ways. And the middle of last year, it was brutal. There's no bones about it. We were all struggling. It was tough. And I stopped thinking about productivity in the same way that I had because I was just burning out. And I just thought, I've got to create a new way of thinking. And actually, I kind of developed a mantra around creativity and collaboration. And I thought, actually, that's what I want from this year. I want to think about like business in a more creative way, and I want to be working with other people. And it's so important, like, to engage. Like, business is all about people, right? That's what matters. It's about the relationships, and it's about, of course, it's about the work, but it's about doing good work with great people. And I think a lot of companies, and certainly the smarter companies, are investing in brand right now. Because the world has shifted, and so they have to shift their business, but also because it's about the people. And I think it's a really smart exercise. It's a really smart way of engaging with your people, whether that's as a startup engaging with your end user, building ecosystem, or whether it's with a larger organization to bring people with you on the journey and to support them through what is a really challenging time. So I think a lot of the smart brands are investing in their kind of brand program right now, and will continue to do so. I think this will be. I'm seeing people putting brand front and center. It's not about like the marketing ops. It's not about PR. It's about it's about thinking about the business as the brand now. And I think that that's a massive shift that's happened, like, and you know, in a good thing, because people are thinking about business in a really different way.
I think we've talked about people. That's really all we've talked about, isn't it, for the whole session? It's really not been about the logo or the customers or the product. We haven't talked about what we're selling or delivering. It has all been about how we're making people feel externally and externally. So think about the process that we've gone through and kind of the exercise of reflection and definition of products and services and values going forward. Ash, do you think this is something you're going to put in every year, that you maybe have a reflective session, not to rebrand as in change your name, but just to kind of reset?
Yeah, for sure. I think say every year, I think it will be a monthly thing. And it's, you know, obviously as a one person company, it's a micro thing, right? It's a every minute of every day, wondering what we can do more and
it's community too, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's exposure with them. But yeah, there's, you know, as Natasha said, it's the business is the brand, the brand is the business, if that doesn't sound too, you know, whimsical, but people buy the experience. Like a good brand should feel, and I say this hesitantly because I know it has negative connotations, but a good brand should act as if it's a cult, essentially, right? Apple haven't launched really a brand new product that is that different for the last few years, yet people still line up to pay £1,000 for a device every single time there is one, and it's because they've built this cult of brand where people follow it regardless of the product that's launched. And so
you could go tribes, couldn't you? I think Seth Godin's tribes is maybe a less divisive term.
Indeed,
you're not brainwashing people.
No, we're not building a statue of me outside my flat just yet.
Is that next year? Yeah,
next year. Yeah. Narcissism 101. But yeah, no, it will be an ongoing piece. And, you know, I like shiny things, and so there will be new things, but I'm very aware of that. And so I limit myself on exploring new opportunities. But there is a list quite literally written next to me of new things that we'll be bringing to the table, and they all live and breathe that different brand. So yeah, it's going to be on a constant basis.
So, I mean, Andy, the same sort of question to you. All those people you've brought together to have these conversations, you don't want to lose those connections. It sounds like you've got a really great momentum and energy going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is something that actually we should just see as a sort of continuous development, really. And maybe there's a conscious point in a year when we pause and take a deeper look at where we are. But I think, you know, as an ongoing activity, we need to find the advocates around our business and maybe some in our extended network. And I just want us as a company to be quite protective of what we put together as well. You know, those days when somebody would just suddenly decide that they were going to create their own email signature or their own version of our PowerPoint template. I want all of that to, you know, I want people to say, hang on a minute, you know, this is how we look, this is how we talk about ourselves, and that's the right way to do it, and to just keep that going. So yeah, I think it's about a continuous improvement process, but maybe, to your point, an more specific annual review.
And do you feel it's maybe re-energized members of the team who maybe been there for a bit longer because they can see a new perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback when we did the positioning stuff was just that. I think, you know, because, you know, the years we've been around, you know, products and services have come and gone, and how we describe ourselves has needed to shift as a consequence. And different people have had different ways of describing us, and not really, you know, sometimes there's been a lack of consistency about where the value really is. And I think going through that positioning exercise, we realized where the value was, and that's not necessarily where you think it is. If you're really close to it, you can't always see it. And that's back to Natasha's point, why it makes sense to get somebody external to help you, because they'll get you talking and listen to the way you talk about the business and see where the passion is. And they might come up with an area where they think, you know, they can see value that we just never would have identified on our own.
And that's the gold dust. When you're given a blank sheet of paper and said, rewrite your website, that's false. Whereas, as you rightly say, if you record someone's meeting or record a phone call, the nuggets, the beauty you'll come out with in just when you articulate it, which when you sit down to write it is so forced. It's hard, isn't it? But it's like writing your own CV. It's horrible.
And it never comes from sat at a desk or even sat in a box with a whiteboard.
The energy's all wrong, isn't it? Yeah.
They always come, like, I know it sounds crazy, but either in the shower or like when you're out for a run, or, you know, even talking to your mum, or what, you know, it's amazing, like those real nuggets, and not even like the nuggets that you kind of come up with, the ones, I mean, I've done so many of these programs now where you're doing stakeholder interviews and like somebody's name keeps coming up and you're like, who is Susan? And they're like, oh, she's the office manager, or she's the, even the cleaner, or, it could be anybody through the business. And I want to speak to Susan, and you go and speak to Susan, and Susan is the glue that holds the whole business together, who listens, who knows, and is like the DNA. And then Susan comes up with like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we all here? And it's not about integrity. It's actually because we are integral to da-da-da-da. And you suddenly go, oh, that's it. That's the one. But
it's a 360 review, internally and externally. We touched a little bit about looking at competitors as well, haven't we? People who your customers might see as a competitor. You're sitting there going, we're totally different to those guys. They're a bunch of cowboys. They don't do what we do. But as far as a potential consumer can see, when they Google you, you look identical.
Yep.
And that's really hard, especially in a space where we've all talked about the fact that it's very noisy. It's how you make it really clear what you do that's different, also without pigeonhole yourself, because you guys will do lots of different things. So how you have all those multiple messages in one website with one voice.
And that's really interesting, because we started this off talking about like all the touch points, but actually all we've been talking about is people, and a lot of that's been coming back into the culture. And we talked at the beginning about branding and cows and stamps and logos, and actually I kind of had this picture of like the kind of the knights with their banners, and it's that sense of pride that we're flying under this flag. This is our flag, and and we wear it here. And I think there's a lot we can do to look at things like sports and that idea of tribe, which is coming back into the heart of business and back into brand.
I really like Seth Godin's tribe, because it is that emotional piece of why we engage that is so difficult to explain. Now, Natasha, I know you've got to go because you've got a midday call. But thank you so much for your time. We're wrapping up anyway, but we knew we'd go over time on this one. So I'll see you soon. I'm kind of any questions from the audience while we're talking, by the way, as we're about to wrap up. Final thoughts from you guys. Unexpected negatives of this process. We're not going to finish on a negative, but are there any things was it more painful, more costly, more time consuming? Margaret, start with you on what was painful.
So yeah, I said earlier, don't rebrand during a pandemic. And that was not to say you shouldn't do it, because actually Vanessa made really good points. I think that right now, in general, we're all very introspective. We're all being forced to look at ourselves a lot more and look at, what creates meaning in our lives. And it makes absolute sense that business should be doing the same thing, because, your employees have to know why they're working for you. And so you have to know, why do we exist? What are we doing? So actually, it is a really good time in that regard. For me, it was really, really hard, because all of the side effects that go along with living through a pandemic, like brain fog and anxiety and fatigue and all that sort of stuff, at the same time as leading a really, big project, it was really hard. And there were times when I thought, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Like, I'm really excited about this. This is the sort of work that I love doing. I love the academy. This is something that I should just be energized every day, and I'm not. So what's going on? Then I realized, that's because no one feels energized at the moment.
It was a global pandemic thing.
That is actually normal. So
totally.
but that was the hardest thing, really, was doing something that is really exciting and fantastic, but you're not getting to enjoy it as much as you would usually, which sort of sucks.
It's coming, hopefully. Yes, the light has got to be at the end of the tunnel. How about you, Ash?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest challenges is very similar to Margaret's, really. It's about, I guess, the process and the end. So the process is difficult because every day molds into one, and it's very difficult to figure out, okay, whether you're getting anywhere with it. I was always the kid at school that would wait until the week before the coursework was due to do the coursework. And so building the website, I'm aware of that. And so fighting against it, but still is an innate kind of piece of personality for me. And so, it meant that the last 2 weekends were there, and I took the day off yesterday because I felt a little bit burnt out from the whole process, frankly, to celebrate. But then the celebration at the end, also was weird because it was just going into the kitchen that I've been in for the last 18 months.
We can't go down the pub and celebrate.
Drinking a beer, and I was like, well, I do this most nights now. I'm just a high functioning alcoholic at this point. But yeah, so it was surreal because of the pandemic. But I think the one thing that would always remain, regardless of lockdown measures, etc., is that there's so much to think about, and the fact that we've spoken about people the whole way through is where we should start and where we should end up. Like,
it's such an emotional connection to all of this, isn't it? Because And Andy, finally, your thoughts.
But I guess, echoing the other guys, I mean, it is harder than you think. It does take more time than you've probably got available. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us. I think, but I think there's also something around just being a bit easier on yourself. So we haven't done this for a very, very long time. We want to get it done. It's important to get it done. We think it will make a difference. We're sure it'll make a difference. But quite frankly, if it takes a month longer than we envisaged, that really doesn't matter at the moment. So I think we can start being, oh gosh, we're a month late or whatever. Right now, as long as it's finished and it kind of ticks all the boxes, I'll be delighted. So I think that's a general thing, isn't it? We've on these sorts of things, we all need to start being less hard on ourselves because it is just difficult. But yeah, I think you've got to kind of go into this with your eyes open. You probably need external help, and you probably need double the amount of time you think.
And you shouldn't rush it, because this is such a core exercise. If it doesn't feel fully cooked, don't put it out there. And as you say, it's not the end of the world if it's a month late.
No.
Very little things are the end of the world. I think, as you said, that's a key learning over this year, is be gentle with yourself and cut yourself some slack. We're all still busy working. That's the key thing I'm really grateful for. Is we're all busy, we're all still here, and it's gonna be getting better, and we'll all get to see each other down the pub, hopefully in a few months' time.
100%.
Finished with thinking about alcohol. It's almost lunchtime, yeah. Thank you all so much for your time. We could have kept going. We're going to write this up and share some thoughts, and also all your beautiful new shiny websites with our community. And we maybe have a part 2 going forward. But thank you so much.
Thank you.